Welcome, I'm Jennie Marie Battistin,
And I'm Stacey Simmons, and we're taking you beyond the woo.
where we're going to help you demystify psychedelics, diving into topics such as how to integrate after a trip, what's a bad trip, and more controversial topics like would God approve of psychedelics, legalization, and cultural appropriation. But I gotta say, it's really surprising, Stacey, to be sitting here with you, two therapists in Los Angeles, California, talking about psychedelics.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, this was like the last thing that I thought I would be doing is talking about psychedelics at this point in my career.
Absolutely. I can remember sitting in substance abuse class and them talking about the dangers. Like,
Yep.
oh my goodness, like you're going to do a psychedelic and you are going to fly off the roofs.
And we were supposed to tell our clients, like, absolutely not. This is so dangerous. It's going to mess up your brain chemistry and, the invitation to psychosis, the whole 9 yards, right? Like, yeah, would
Yeah.
never have thought in a million years that I'd be sitting here effectively endorsing psychedelics.
Totally.
Yeah.
But maybe that's where we really start this
Yeah.
first episode is why are we even here doing this podcast? And how did two therapists really end up here? What was our journey like?
And two kind of, let's get real, like two pretty straight-laced therapists. Like neither of us are kind of the people who are, like, ooh, I can't wait to try something that's illicit or weird, right? Like neither of us are those people. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look at us. I am sure that if anyone walked into my office, I'm wearing a sweater. The last thing in the world that they're going to expect is I'm going to say, you know what I think we need to do for your mental health is I think you need to go on a trip with me.
Yeah. I think we need a psychedelic journey to really help bring the healing along. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
Can't
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's dive into it a little bit
Mhm.
more.
Yeah.
So, for me, my journey was really pretty interesting because I grew up in a household where I had a dad who was an alcoholic. So, watching that, I think I was really hesitant. Substances to me seemed like the last thing I even wanted to try.
Mhm.
So much so that in high school, everyone knew Jennie was the safe person to call because she definitely was not going to be drinking, testing any drugs. She was going to be the designated
Need a
driver for sure. And so I was pretty straight-laced. I think the first time I actually had a drink was almost a year after my 21st birthday because I had a brand new baby at 21. So I didn't even celebrate with a drink.
Oh, wow.
So I really had tried no substances up to that point. And so, when I was in school, it just all confirmed more and more like, drugs are bad, they're dangerous.
Right.
They talked about the war on drugs. And then flash forward 2016, a client that I'd been working with, and we had sent him to rehab for alcohol. He comes in for a session, and, all of a sudden I'm noticing he's having these insights that he had never put together. And over a 3-week period of time, I had a very different person who showed up in my office. Someone who I would have said before was probably fitting the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder no longer seemed to be fitting that criteria. So I think after that third visit, I looked at him and I said, seems like things have really changed. I know I'm a great therapist, but in 3 weeks, you seem like you're putting together things like you have never put together.
Mhm.
And he says, well, I went and did a thing. And I could tell there was a real hesitation. He's looking down at the ground, and I'm like, safe space.
Right.
You
No judgment.
no
Not going to
judgment.
judge you here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's like, well, so I went and did ketamine. I think my eyes must have bugged out into the biggest bug eyes.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, wait. No. This was a medical treatment.
Right.
And I'm just kind of like, huh. I'm like, well, did it help? And he's like, well, yeah. I mean, don't you think? And I'm like, it's pretty undeniable. So he left, and I immediately am just
Like
deep
online,
diving into what is this ketamine therapy?
Right. It's so interesting. I had something very similar. So I had a client who had really terrible postpartum depression. And I'd never seen postpartum like this clinically, or even I worked in a hospital for a little while, didn't see it in the hospital. I'd never seen anything like this before. I mean, she could barely drive. She couldn't get out of bed. She didn't shower. She couldn't take care of her children. Like terrible, terrible, terrible. And she had a psychiatrist who wanted to send her to a ketamine clinic to get an infusion. And the first 2, 3 experiences with the ketamine clinic were very good. Um, Same thing, had a completely different patient, completely different client. Like suddenly she was talking, she was making connections and
Oh,
insight
yeah.
about like, oh, I think this is what's happening. Oh, I had never thought about my relationship with my kids this way, or I'd never thought about my relationship with motherhood this way. And
Mm.
just like, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, I'm totally in. Whereas before it had been trying to get her even just to be motivated to think she could get better. Like that was the level
Wow.
we were talking at before ketamine. But then we had a turn because in these ketamine clinics, they weren't set up for mental health. This was not where she went, was not a mental health treatment center. It was kind of a blanket pain clinic where anesthesiologists were doing the administration. And she, on her fourth, treatment, she had a really bad experience. And that was kind of like my wake up to this is great and it's amazing, but maybe they're not doing it in a mental health way. Like maybe, just administering someone an IV of drugs is not enough.
Yeah.
And then,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and what's so interesting
mhm,
is my client, same thing. It was
mhm,
his fourth journey,
mm,
which ended up being an extremely challenging journey. And he is grabbing the IV pole, working his way over to the door to scream for someone to
yeah.
help because he was in this room asking for help. No one's hearing him.
That's so crazy because it was almost identical for my client. Fourth journey. And she was in this room and they had cameras on her, but they didn't have and there was a button she could press, but she kept pressing the button and nobody came. And she was having a terrible, terrible panic attack.
Hmm.
And she wound up, same thing, like crawling, dragging her IV behind her, screaming the whole time. And that was not what I needed as a clinician. I didn't
Mm-mm.
need to have to put her back together in this way, right? Like, wha- now they broke you again.
Yeah.
So that's when, for me, that's when I started really diving into like, okay, how do we do this right? What
Hmm.
is the right way to do this? And there were some other changes that came. Her psychiatrist was also so convinced that the ketamine was going to be helpful that he figured out a different way for her to get it than doing it IV in a clinic. So, and that kind of opened the door for he and I to talk about it and so on and so forth. And that's when I came to you and you came, we were both kind of in the same thing at the same time, like, oh my God, we got to go learn more about this. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was so interesting
Mm,
because I don't think we really knew that we both had a client
yeah.
at the same time
Yeah.
until after this bad
Mm,
experience for our
mm-hmm.
clients. And then we start talking, and I'm sharing with you what I'm learning, and you're sharing with me what you're learning. And then all of a sudden, I see this advertisement for Field Trip, which
Mm-hmm.
was a ketamine clinic at the
Yep.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were offering a training,
Yep.
a weekend training where therapists could come and learn more about ketamine assisted therapy
Mm-hmm.
and have an experience. So I tentatively was like, I'm going to go. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to go. Well, I should go. No, no, I can't go. And then I was like, well, if I send this to Stacey, she'll probably say yes, which
Mm-hmm.
will help me go. And it would be
Or she'll
nice.
tell me I'm
Or
crazy.
she'll tell me I'm crazy. Yes. Yeah. So, I was really hesitant. And of course, I sent it to you, and you're like, I'm in.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
Oh,
okay.
now I have to go.
Now I have to go. I have to do this thing, and it's an experiential, like
Right.
they're going to give us some ketamine.
Yeah.
So I was pretty nervous going up to Seattle to go to this event.
I was a little nervous too, but I was excited too at the same time. Like I've never been somebody who's like high sensate experience. I don't need like same with you. Like never been interested in drugs or I'm not a daredevil. Don't need to jump out of airplanes or anything like that. So this was kind of a leap for me to be like, yeah, give me a shot of ketamine and let me see what it feels like. But yeah, I mean that experience though was really great. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty fun. And, we stayed with my sister,
Mm-hmm.
my little sister, who is the rebel in the family and has, you know, much experience with many different
Oh, I
substances.
did not know this
Oh,
about her.
yes. So she was so excited to see her all buttoned up sister
Oh,
come and stay with her and go do these ketamine
oh, that
journeys.
is hilarious. I did
Yeah.
not know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a really interesting experience. Knowing that I had to call my sister and admit, like, we're coming to do this thing. I guess I didn't have to tell her. I could have just said we were doing a training,
Training, yeah.
but I was a little bit worried, like, if I got home that day from my ketamine experience to her house, she might be like, what is going on here? I wasn't sure exactly how was I going to feel after
Well,
this.
and they told us we couldn't drive, so
Yeah.
we would have had to have Ubered or whatever. So yeah, and yeah, it was only for the weekend. So I'm glad we told her. I mean, it's kind of funny though because I did not know that about her, and thinking about just that whole weekend of kind of how we were talking about things and we went to dinner and everything. Like, oh, that now it makes a lot more
Right? Right?
sense.
Yeah. I mean, to this day, I mean, that was, well, gosh, I think that was
Oh,
back
it's
in
like
2018,
yeah,
2019, something like that.
2018. Yeah.
But to this day, she still like loves to like at uh gatherings of friends or family say, "Oh, guess what Jenny's doing now? You wouldn't believe it." And everyone like is always like,
Wait,
"What?
wait, who? No,
Jenny?
not Jenny.
Not
No, no,
Jenny?"
it must be another Jenny you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting, but yeah, that first experience of ketamine was I don't, I kind of had a sense of what
Mhm.
maybe we might experience, but still wasn't sure. And our experiences were
Yeah, they're very
both
different.
very different.
Mhm.
But really understanding, like putting this in the therapeutic frame
Yeah.
was really interesting. Like the teachers that weekend that were guiding us, I think, I mean, wow.
Yeah, they were pretty amazing. It was for me it was also, similar extraordinary experience. And especially because you and I had also just started the integrative psychiatry program where we got certified, and it was not, at least at that point, because it was the beginning, we weren't getting the depth of knowledge that we got at the field trip experience, and it made up for it in the end. But at that first weekend, it was kind of like, oh, okay. And I was just shocked with how the knowledge that they gave us about, like, okay, you're going to have insight today and it's going to last over a week. And here's what we think the mechanism of action is in the brain so that you can move forward with your clients to understand when you see a certain behavior, or if you see a certain reflection, this is probably what's happening. There's going to be an increase in neurotransmitters because of the increase in glutamate with this particular medicine. And that was really important for me, like to understand that there was a whole neuroscience behind it that wasn't just people tripping, basically, right? Like, so yeah, there was something greater than psychology that was more neuroscientific.
Yeah, that's what I really appreciated about
Mhm.
it. Because I think for me, just being a little bit more cautious,
Mhm.
always following by the rules kind of person, I really wanted to understand the science of it
Mhm.
and really know how and why was
Mm.
this going to help clients.
Yeah.
Because I definitely got into the field of psychology because I wanted to help people heal.
Mhm.
I believe that human behavior and our psyche has unlimited capacity to heal. But I was watching over time, like, look, we're in a day and age where there's more psychotropic drugs than ever,
Yeah.
but we're in a mental health crisis. People are not getting better. They're
Mhm.
getting sicker. And I would watch my clients go, and the typical thing, go take this medication. Let's see in 2 weeks if any change. Oh, no change. Let's increase it.
Right.
Oh, 2 weeks later,
Still
still no
nothing.
change. Well, let's increase it. Oh, that one's not working. Let's try this one.
Right.
You
And then
know?
months and months and
Months and
months. Yeah.
months and no improvement.
Mhm.
And, frankly, I had a lot of clients that were chronically suicidal. And here they're on multiple medications. They're not living life.
Yeah.
They're numb to life now.
Mhm.
Yeah, they aren't jumping off a building, but they aren't getting better.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I really need to understand the science behind this,
Mhm.
that it's not just, hey, party
Right.
time. Let's have some K. And,
Yeah.
no, I really needed to understand that. And that's what I really appreciated about Field Trip is they really helped us understand that as we cautiously worked towards our own experience
Mhm.
that weekend.
Mhm.
And, it was interesting. It was a little bit of a leap still for me, even after we got through the science and I
Mhm.
understood what was happening a little bit more in the brain,
Mhm.
why ketamine was working, why it was helping. But I know for me, because I didn't struggle with mental health, I was like, well, why am I doing this?
Mm.
This seems a little odd because, look, hey, someone goes to medical school and they don't say, hey, before you prescribe these medications, we're going to have you try this cholesterol med,
Mhm.
try this anticoagulation,
Mhm.
med.
Mhm.
No, people don't go to medical school and try every
Right.
medication before they prescribe it. So there was a little bit of a leap of like, I'm going to try this to experience it before I recommend it. But yet at the same time, it really became an invaluable experience for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really important insight too, just to point out like there is something about for this particular type of work, having had the experience so that you can talk to your client about it. I don't think you can talk eloquently about it from a theoretical perspective. I don't think it's possible with psychedelics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I've had to pull back a little bit on how I
Mhm.
explain to clients about my experience because I don't think most people see giant gummy bears
Floating through space.
floating through space. I mean, I'm not even sure what, still to
Okay,
this
we're gonna have
day.
to explain this reference. Okay, so when we did our journey, I went first, and my experience was very, very mild. I was hoping for something a little deeper, but basically it's ketamine. They gave us an injection, and I was floating through space, and it was very gentle. It was very like easy, and it was very dissociative. All things at the time that I really needed. I was under a lot of stress at the time, and then I had like these great insights about my relationship and about what I want to do with my career, and it was really, really great. But when it was your turn, I didn't. I had almost zero visuals. You, on the other hand, had interesting visuals for yours. Yeah,
Yeah,
giant
absolutely.
space gummy bear.
Yeah, giant space gummy bear. I mean, and what was funny is like I remember like trying to like, I'm floating through space
Mhm.
and I'm like aiming for this gummy bear like it's like a spaceship that I've got to get. And I remember feeling like I had finally captured this giant gummy bear. I'm about ready to take a bite out of its ear, and all of a sudden the music in my ear stopped.
Yeah,
And I like
yeah.
pulled my ear thing off and I'm like, the music stopped and I was about ready to take a bite of the gummy bear. And you got the music started again, and I went
Mhm.
back in, and yeah, it was an interesting experience. And then at one point, I felt like I saw this creature that kind of looked like from the movie The Abyss.
Oh.
Yeah, and
Oh,
she was
oh.
like inviting me to come across and around the other side of the
Mm.
universe. And then all of a sudden, I was a dolphin jumping from space into the ocean, jumping out of the ocean, saying, free to be me, free to be me. And it was a very
I'm so jealous.
yeah, it was a very visual experience, but I have noticed that with ketamine, a lot of people don't have a lot of visuals. There's
Mhm.
more abstract, yes, the
Mhm.
galaxy
Mhm.
or abstract shapes,
Mhm.
but it is more of a felt sense and a
Yeah.
more of, just kind of making new connections and insights.
Yeah, and I mean, that's because of the neurotransmitter that it activates. And you just don't have most people don't have as many receptors in their visual cortex, but you evidently do.
Apparently. And, maybe that highlights why it became such a creative medicine for me.
Mhm.
I mean, poor you, your poor hands afterwards, you're like having to scribe and write and type and I'm just like
Yeah.
just like endless amount of ideas.
Well, and not only was it like immediate, because that's just to kind of give people the idea of like how you and I work with psychedelics generally. Like when somebody's coming out of their session, we're typically taking notes and just writing down insights. And with you, it was not only immediately after your medicine session, but it was the next day when we were flying home, and you were just like, "Oh, and this, oh, and this," and I was like on the plane, like frantically typing on my iPad, just trying to keep up and yeah, keep things going.
Yeah. So I think that's the fascinating thing about this medicine.
Hmm.
And maybe that's why, us being in Los Angeles, a lot of our clients tend to be in the creative
Yeah.
world and space that we work with.
Mhm.
And they've really noticed the benefits of not only alleviating their mental health suffering,
Mhm. Mhm.
but also adding to their
Creativity.
creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Hmm.
found that too. A lot of my, I mean, I know we both have a lot of kind of industry people, but I think I might have more writers than you do.
Hmm.
And just the writers are just like, yeah, yeah, more of that, please, more of that, please. And not meaning more of the medicine necessarily, but just the insight and the expansion. But it goes, that kind of goes to the way that psychedelics work in general. They tend to expand the capacity of someone as opposed to narrowing it. And I think that's the difference between psychedelics and most psychotropic medicines is that the psychotropic medicines tend to narrow what people can experience. So that's why the depression goes away, but so does the joy, right?
Mm.
And whereas what happens with psychedelics, and there's research to back this up, that they get their capacity is expanded, so they can tolerate more. They can tolerate more depression. They can tolerate or more sadness. They can tolerate more joy and more awe, and that doesn't happen with traditional psychotropic meds. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And so I think it's been a fascinating journey that we
Mhm.
really have been on.
Mhm.
And then after we had our ketamine weekend and that journey, I think we became even more excited
Yeah.
about doing this work, really understanding that mechanism of action. And then we really dove into IPI,
Yep.
Integrative Psychiatry Institute, was
Mhm.
a 1 year fellowship.
Yeah, 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah,
Yeah, of meeting with.
yeah,
Yeah, it was intense.
it was intense.
Yeah.
And then we had to take
Huge exam.
huge exam.
Oh, and we had an experiential. We had to go to
Oh, that's right.
Colorado
Yeah,
and do the
yeah.
experiential as
And we
well.
had the experiential, and that
Mhm.
was really interesting. But
Mhm.
yeah, that exam was really fascinating.
Mhm.
Here we'd been several years out of school, several years licensed, and now
Mhm.
we've got to take this certification
Yeah,
exam.
yeah.
But I don't know, that was really, it was a really cool culmination, and to actually feel like, wow, we went and did this fellowship
Mhm.
and we learned about a lot of different medicines beyond ketamine. There
Yep.
are so many different psychedelics that are out there, and really understanding the different mechanisms, how to do patient selection,
Mhm.
how to really help people with integration,
Mhm.
working through those challenging journeys. No bad trip is really a bad trip if you're working with a trained professional to help you integrate that. Yes, it might be challenging.
Mhm.
But we learned so much valuable information, and we passed the exam.
We did. Thank God.
Thank God. And we got our certificate,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know? And we did the experiential. And
Yeah.
then we did, I've now done the second layer of the experiential,
Mhm.
doing psilocybin
Mhm.
up in Oregon, which that was a whole fascinating journey. Again, I was so nervous, and you were not there this time.
I couldn't be there this time, but yeah, I haven't. I'm doing mine this year. I was supposed to do it this month, and my husband had to have surgery, so I wasn't
Yeah.
able to go. But
But I was doing psilocybin in Oregon, and you were writing a book on
I was
psilocybin.
writing a book on psilocybin. Yeah, I have a book coming out in February of this year called Mushroom Pharmacy. Practical guide to psychedelic mushrooms, and it's everything. It's all kinds of different information on different species and how to, if you are inclined to go foraging for mushrooms, how to do that. But throughout the entire foraging section, it's just like, please don't do this, please don't do this, please don't do this, because there's so many dangers to foraging for your own mushrooms that it's much better to, if you are in a place where it is legal, to get them from someone who's trusted, or to grow them yourself, again, if it's legal where you do it, because there's all kinds of things that can happen with wood lovers paralysis in the substrates, and if there's heavy metals around, you just don't know. And mushrooms tend to clean their environment, so they're going to absorb all those heavy metals, and you don't want to suddenly be taking psychedelic mushrooms that have been soaking up arsenic out in the woods, trying to help clean up an environmental site. So just better to, if you live in a legal place, get them
Mhm.
legally from somebody who knows what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is going to be an invaluable guide. I think right now
Yes.
it's so timely because there is more interest than ever
Mm-hmm.
into psychedelics and psilocybin, and especially with decriminalization in
Mm-hmm.
Oregon, Colorado, several cities around the country have, I think is it Massachusetts or Maine that's also worked on a decriminalization as
Oh,
well.
there's so many states:
Mhm.
Rhode Island, Illinois,
Mhm.
Iowa. There's cities and states who are all looking at how do they integrate psilocybin mushrooms in particular, specifically for PTSD and other kinds of addressing other kinds of mental health challenges. Everybody's kind of waiting. They're waiting for the FDA to do something. And California is a great example. So Governor Newsom, everybody thought he was going to legalize psilocybin mushrooms, and instead, what he did was he signed a bill basically saying that when the FDA lowers the schedule for mushrooms and any psychedelics, then California will automatically be part of that. The law will change immediately in California. There won't need to be a ratification. So that's exciting, but it's also like it means we're all holding our breath, waiting. But yeah, the book, all this is in the book for wherever, where the law is now. But the thing I'm most excited about the book is I spent a ton of time looking at what the current scientific research is about how psilocybin is helping people in research and clinical research.
Mm.
So everything from pain management to depression, and some of the most interesting things are the research that's coming out is telling us more about the brain. Like there's a research study that came out of UCSD, University of California, San Diego, where they found that people who have had amputations, what giving people who have had amputations, giving them psychedelics or giving them psilocybin specifically has taught us is that the brain, the reason people have phantom limb pain is not anything we understood before. And it's that the brain has a map of the body.
Wow.
And psilocybin helps people's brains remap the body faster so the phantom limb pain goes away sooner. And we had no way of knowing that
Wow.
until people were doing that kind of research.
Yeah, it's really phenomenal. It
Mhm.
really is interesting. And, we are in a day and age where we're actually able to do functional MRI scans. We're able to see a little bit more of what's going on
Yeah.
with the brain, the neurogenesis that we're
Mhm.
seeing. Really incredible time.
Yeah.
So really interesting again that we both kind of like fell into doing this work really because we had clients who went and explored it because they just traditional psychotropic drugs were failing
Yeah.
them, and as good a therapy as we were doing, we weren't able to overcome what was happening in the
In the
brain,
brain.
you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so psychedelics are really, merging that together with psychotherapy
Mhm.
as really changing so many different lives and helping people with trauma recovery
Mhm.
like we've never seen before,
Yeah.
and I love working with ketamine,
Mhm.
and I look forward to being able to work legally with other substances here in the United States as they start to realize like, psychedelics were underground prematurely. And maybe, there's part of me that feels like, did pharmaceutical companies like have an agenda and did they, work on war on drugs
Mhm.
kind of with psychedelics because they saw this as a threat to them
Yeah.
that, we really don't want people getting better because if people get better, then they don't need our drugs.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, mental health medicine is a huge industry. I mean, to your point, I think the other piece of it, and I don't know how to feel about this, right? Because some of the research that's out there is that the pharmaceutical companies that are trying to develop drugs based on some of these psychedelic medicines, they're trying to do it where there's no journey, where there's no psychedelic experience. And all the research points to the fact that when you have the psychedelic experience, that's when the healing takes place, or that's what initiates or facilitates the healing. So I don't know how to feel about it, right? Like I guess
Mm-hmm.
time will tell, but it's like some people are doing research, do we give people a psychedelic that gives them a time structured experience where, we know it's going to be 2 hours and you can time it and et cetera, et cetera. Or do we just give people a psychedelic based medicine that doesn't have any psychedelic experience at all? And yeah, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm waiting to see, but I'm a little skeptical, I guess.
Yeah. I know it'll be really interesting. Well, I think there's going to definitely be clients that might be inclined because the
Mhm.
idea of having a psychedelic experience is scary to them
Mhm.
and they rather not have that experience. So maybe there's going to be a place for both,
Yeah, that's fair.
you know?
Yeah.
And, for those who aren't quite ready, maybe there is still some benefit in,
Mhm.
taking the medicine without that journey.
Mhm.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where that goes.
That's a really good point because I have some clients who have confided in me that they microdose And, if you're microdosing properly, there's no psychedelic experience. And it's made a big difference for those clients. So I have nothing to do with their
Right.
decisions to do that. But, people come in sometimes rather sheepishly, like your client did, and like, I'm doing this thing. So, and they've everybody that's tried it has told me they've had good experiences. So you might have a point.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it'll be interesting, and we're definitely going to journey a little further into all of this.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. We'll get to microdosing, the pros and the cons of that. What's a little bit more of what's the science behind psychedelics? What really is happening? What the different medicines are? And then we're gonna kind of get into how can I legally maybe experience some of those. So that's why I have retreats. I take people to Mexico so that we can work with things like ayahuasca and psilocybin and bufo, the Sonora toad all virus. And that's not licking the toad.
Don't lick the toad.
We don't lick the toad.
Yeah.
No licking the toad.
Yeah.
But, we're really going to kind of get into that as we work through this podcast this season.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, as you know, you and I have been friends a long time. I'm a super nerd. So the more we get to talk about the neuroscience, the more nerdy I'm going to geek out on you. And I hope you just smile and enjoy it with me, because you're pretty nerdy too.
I'm pretty nerdy, but I just like to have the fun too. So, this kind of buttoned up therapist still just likes to have the fun. So you bring more of the science, I'll bring a little bit of the woo, but not too much of the woo. And we'll go on some interesting journeys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, so tune in next episode, because we're going to go into a little bit of the controversy, and this is an area that I had to overcome is, would God approve? Being a therapist who was raised in a religious home, I had to kind of work past those kind of questions. Would God approve of psychedelics? So we look forward. Tune in on our next episode in 2 weeks.